So I come here as someone who is president and CEO of a 95-year-old museum and cultural institution focused on Swedish heritage, and I'm a researcher on AI and ethics and a tenured professor on leave from Carnegie Mellon University. So I feel like I have just had my dream Jeopardy category going on with this panel. I need a clicker. Here's a clicker. That's what I need. One of the things I realize when we talk about AI is that we hear a lot of things, especially that it's new and it's inevitable. And it's sort of inevitable in that in a world kind of way, you know, it's coming, you can't do anything about it. I want to talk a little bit about what that inevitability looks like and what the newness looks like, and I want to challenge it a little bit. Because AI isn't new, even though you might seem to believe that it's new. I don't think I've heard anyone here mention that it isn't new. How new? How not new? 1955 is when the term artificial intelligence is coined by a group of researchers who got together at Dartmouth for the summer to hash out the baseline platform for research for AI that was largely in place for a really long time, and to some extent, even now. They called AI making machine behave in ways that would be called intelligent if a human were so behaving. We've heard words like industrial symbiosis when we're referring to energy systems, but the term symbiosis and human-computer symbiosis goes back to 1960, the work of J.C.R. Licklider, who put in place the basis for the internet with ARPANET. And we have the words of Marvin Minsky as early as 1961, and it's pretty accurate, you would think, from today, where we're seeing that we're on the threshold of an era that will be strongly influenced by and quite possibly dominated by intelligent problem-solving machines. So it's not new. This is something I wrote about. I'm just dropping this in here briefly. I wrote about this in a book about the history of architecture and AI. Looking at its role in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And when you look at some of the things that were developed by the predecessor to the MIT Media Lab, by Nicholas Negroponte and the researchers and engineers and architects there from 1967 to 1984, you see a set of interfaces that look like what we're dealing with now. Now, to be clear, I know that this moment is different. And I promised you a Nordic approach, and we are going to go there. It's just not going to be what you might have expected. This is Simon Lindgren and Virginia Dignam from Umeå University, and they have to say a couple of things about this moment. They write, AI is no longer an engineering discipline where technological considerations are at the center. AI is about a broad societal transformation with political implications. And I think this notion of political implications and totalitarianism is actually pretty severe. And we know that AI is old, and even generative AI is old. The history of generativity goes back about as far as our history of AI goes. There's a cycle of calculation, representation, and generation that goes through the development of large-scale systems, going back to the post-war era. So this is not new, but large language models are new. And I think that one of the things we just heard in the session that just took place was just how dangerous that can be. When you see just recent news articles about generative AI, you see questions like, generative AI is here, and who should control it? And you think about the reach of large tech companies that are larger than nation states, indeed larger than continents, when you look at the user base. It's gigantic, it's massive, it's billions. And one of the things I like a lot about how Simon Lindgren and how Virginia Dignam talk about this is they challenge this idea that if you could only build it the right way, AI could be a catch-all solution for a range of societal problems. They said, there's an idea that AI technologies could solve everything if only we take care of the potential side effects. But AI is not magic, nor is it the solution to all of our problems. And so I look at things like this, right, where on one hand, we do have responsible AI groups, and we do have ethics in AI groups, and I have to wonder how successful they ultimately have been. To quote the researcher Sonja Rate, who's at ITU in Copenhagen and just about to defend her dissertation, when we were talking about this, she said, "Bold and responsible, for what? Who's really accountable?" And there's a question of accountability here that I think we keep dancing around, but we don't land on. But lest I get only a little bit dark, I'll go a bit darker. Perhaps we all read the New York Times article a couple weeks ago about what large language models are doing and what some tech companies have done in terms of taking up the entire production of human output, all human information. Sam Altman suggesting that they will have completed siphoning up the internet soon. Or Meta saying they wanted to buy Simon & Schuster, the publishing company, in order to have more long-form media to make sense of, to train competitive large language models. It doesn't seem to be for the good of human, it seems to be for the good of competition. Mistral, by the way, the French AI company, is using 19th century texts because they've been particularly good about digitizing French long-form texts in France, the Bibliothèque Nationale. So where does this lead us here? If I'm the president and CEO of a museum about Swedish heritage, and we're in a room full of people who are devoted to the Nordics and devoted to innovation. And you might not believe it to know me, but I'm also optimistic about the possibilities for technology and deeply interested in how they connect. So how do these things come together with what my museum looks like and these concerns? I think we've heard a couple of things here, and I just would like to share them with you. Yesterday, State Minister Sara Moody talked about Sweden's education system in the way that it challenges conventional wisdom, celebrates critical thinking, and builds creativity. And we heard Finland's ambassador to the US, Mikko Hautala, say that Finland is not only a great country for coffee and happiness and engineering, but great creativity. And they rank higher in their AI capabilities than any of the Nordic countries. We could take what Martin Svensson says, who's the managing director of AI Sweden, and he writes, "Based on who we are, our values and our strengths, Sweden has a tremendous opportunity to solve key societal, democratic, and business challenges with the use of AI." And the key word here is values. One thing that I think of, and if you look around this room and the beautiful wood, and if you walk through this building and you see the attention to detail and the craft at hand, is something that we understand in the Nordic countries, that there's something very, very human about the touch of the world and craft. And I think of how, I'm going to skip this part. I think of how children in Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Denmark are trained in slöjd. Slöjd is handcraft, and how many people here had a slöjd education? Couple folks here. So this is working in wood and working in textiles in some way or another. And the goal of it here is to instill self-reliance, comfort with tools, the ability to look to a peer to learn how to solve a problem together, and to feel comfortable about how you work with tools in the world. You learn about yourself in the process. This is a fundamental part of education throughout the Nordic countries. And to me, this sounds like we might learn something here if we need to approach these questions about literacy and generative AI. So indeed, AI can be a threat, but it can also be an opening for how we draw from Nordic values like fairness and responsibility and anti-bias. Maybe there's a way here for us to think through how we design technology and how we find a place for AI in the world. I think there's a question here for how human values and AI provide greater pathways to security, how Nordic values can inform us in how we develop data sets and algorithms and models, including large language models in the Nordic countries, in a way that's fair and safe, and how we fight bias. And all of these are important as these large language models proliferate. So to be sure, I think that thinking through human values takes time for consideration, and in a world of run fast and break things, that's sometimes a little bit slow in the offing. But I do think this is the moment for Nordic societal values to shape AI innovation, if not lead it. And this means partnerships, new kinds of partnerships in new kinds of ways through research, technology, and defense, through design, architecture, and the arts, and more. Trying to figure out what I'm clicking. Oh, I'm clicking the wrong button. There we go. Thank you. So ultimately, I think this is where we land. That generativity might lie within our models, but it also resides within ourselves. It resides within our craft and how we think of craft on the world. It resides within our creativity. It resides within our power. And it resides within our values. And this is the heart of innovation. This is where I want to see it, not in the inevitability of doom or the constant newness, but within ourselves. Thank you.